Hello, good morning, and I hope my voice is coming clear to all of you. Welcome to this presentation of our Master of Research in Science and Management of Climate Change. As you know, this is a virtual presentation, online presentation, because the present condition in Italy and elsewhere in the world prevents us from organizing any kind of face-to-face in-person meeting. But nevertheless, this is an important occasion to know more about this master and to learn about what University of Venice and CMCC and OGS are offering to master students. I'm Professor Carraro, and I'm here because I'm the coordinator of the PhD program in Science and Management of Climate Change, a PhD program which is closely linked to this master program, as you will learn in a few minutes from Professor Deschamps, who is coordinator of the master program. The two programs, the PhD one and the master one, are closely interlinked. And the reason why I'm here is that because I would like to tell the students that one of the main benefits of this master program is its strong interconnection with the PhD program. Students will work together, will follow the same courses, will be able to share the same kind of experience. This is just to say this is a high-level master program with content that are designed for PhD students, but adapted to master students who will take same courses, but then at the end will follow a different path, whereas PhD students will continue with a PhD dissertation, which is basically a research-based dissertation. Master students will follow a different path with an internship, with a dissertation, which is more job-oriented, designed to find a good job on institutions, companies, organizations that focus their own activity on climate change, in particular on the economics of climate change management, both in terms of mitigation and in terms of adaptation. This master program is fairly new. The PhD program was launched 15 years ago. The first one in Europe, by the way, so it's the oldest one in Europe in terms of preparation of students who want to do research on climate change in a very interdisciplinary manner. This is a very nice feature of the program because students work together, both from science and modeling of climate change to policies, economic policies, and business policies to deal with climate change. So it was launched 15 years ago. It has been very successful. And 3 years ago, we decided to launch the master program because we realized that there is a demand in the market. There is a demand from organizations and companies for this kind of competencies, this kind of skills, in which you don't need to do research, but you need to work proactively on mitigation and adaptation to climate change, both in public and in private organizations. This master program is one of the one of the best programs of the University of Venice, which has a very long tradition. It has been the second oldest business school in Europe, and is certainly one of the top business schools in Italy and in Europe as well. So in addition to this tradition of studies in economics and management, we added a new developed initiative on climate change, which is strongly interlinked with the other research issues that the University of Venice carries on. In particular, this master program has been designed jointly by 3 departments: the Department of Economics, the Department of Management, and the Department of Environmental Sciences and Computer Sciences, in order to give students all the components they need to tackle a very horizontal, interdisciplinary issue like climate change. What we offer students is therefore a preparation to deal with climate change from many viewpoints, but with a very practical orientation, with the basis that gives students the possibility to go to find a job in a market which is highly demanding this kind of students. So as far as my own introduction, this is it. I would like to, just to give you a framework, the vision beyond upon which we develop this program, and I'll give Enrica the chance the role of coordinating this presentation. As you know, the presentation we don't only focus on the contents of the master. It will also show you how an important organization is now utilizing the kind of students, the kind of competencies that will be developing the master program. And we have here today with us Piero Pelizzaro from the city of Milan, the municipality of Milan, who will give us a lecture exactly into this direction. But let me stop here. I believe that Enrica, Professor Dechan, will do a much better job in introducing Professor Pelizzaro and in presenting the contents of the master program. Thank you for being here, and I hope that many of you will be enrolled in this program, and I look forward to meeting you in September when lectures will start. Thank you all, and Enrica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, it's my great pleasure to introduce Piero Pelizzaro. I thought that he would bring a very interesting perspective on this topic because Piero, as you might know, has a very important and unique job because he's one of the few chief resilience officer at the municipality of Milan. It's one of the few cities in the world to have such a figure, and therefore I thought that he could provide very interesting viewpoints and perspective, basically on the professional needs and opportunities that we can find in relation to climate change, in relation to big challenges such as the one posed by climate change. So the organization of the event is the following. The idea is to listen to Piero for about 20 minutes. We will also take the questions right after his presentation because it's a busy period, so he probably needs to go back to daily work. And if you have questions you would like to pose to Piero, you can use the question tab on the GoToWebinar platform that you see on your right-hand side. After this small presentation by Piero, we will have a more detailed presentation about the program. So the content, the study program, the faculty, and myself, I will spend some time giving you some details about the master program, and along with Malcolm Mistry, who's also the deputy coordinator of this master. So I would now like to give the floor to Piero so that he can start by telling us a little bit about his experience as I was saying, Chief Resilient Officer at the Municipality of Milan, but Piero has been working in relation to climate change for the past 10 years. So he actually has quite long-standing experience, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. So Piero, now you should be able to share the screen.
I think it's already there, if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So good morning everybody. Thank you, Professor Carraro. Thank you, Professor Lechan, for the introduction. And I'm honored to be part of this session this morning, to be part of the launch of this new master that I think it's important, especially at this stage. Let me introduce myself first, briefly what I'm doing. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer of the City of Milan. I'm the only one in Italy, and we are among other 83 CRO, Chief Resilience Officer at the global scale. What does it mean be a chief resilience officer? That's I think is the main question that I always have to answer every day when they ask me about my job. So first of all, the idea of the chief resilience officer comes in 2012 after Hurricane Sandy hit New York. At that time, the Rockefeller Foundation decided to invest $156 million to launch the program of the 100 Resilient Cities Network. And within the 100 Resilient Cities Network, the idea behind this was also to create within a public administration an expert, or to have a sort of public servant that try to deal with the complexity of the city, and at the same time, the chief resilience officer also is the one, or the lucky one, that try to overcome silos within organization. That is one of the main challenge we are facing. What does it mean overcome silos? My job in everyday life is to make my colleagues speak each other and try to make all the different sector link to the others. On the other end, one of the main priorities comes over the years, especially in cities, are the impact of climate change, especially. And we as a department, we have now been moved through different departments to understand where is the best location for a resilience department, a chief resilience officer. So at the beginning, for the nature of being cross-sectoral, I was allocated with my department. My department is the moment we have 13 people working in the Department of the Resilience, the City of Milan. At the beginning, we were located within the city manager structures. So directly, we were under the city manager, and my political referent was the mayor, Mr. Sala. Through the years, we moved in 2018, and the second year of our existence, let's say, we have been reallocated within the urban planning department, and I will try to explain why we were in the urban planning department, because at that time there was the master plan, but we can see through the resilience strategy presentation of why we're there. And finally, since last July, the mayor decided to take on his own all the competencies on climate change and environment. So at the moment, we don't have a deputy mayor for environment, because the mayor itself is the mayor for environment and climate change. So Mr. Sala is in charge of the climate change and environmental policy. To make this more efficient, because it became a priority of the city until the corona, we also have created, as a City of Milan, a new department named Environmental Transition. And the Environmental Transition Department is composed by 3 units. One is on energy and climate, the other one is on waste and water, and the third one is on the urban resilience. And so since the last July, I'm part of the Environmental Transition Department, and I'm in charge of the climate change adaptation policy. I'm in charge of the resilience strategy, and at the same time, I'm lead the urban forest program of the cities. The urban forest program of the city aim to plant 3 million trees before 2030 to reduce the impact of climate change in terms of heating and in terms of also flooding, to improve the capacity of the urban or the built environment to be more capable to drainage the extreme weather events or the flash floods. So it's a kind of a unique situation for us. Because the resilience, especially my figure, is not properly doesn't have a legislative framework in the country. But you have to consider that in other countries, as in UK or as in Germany, especially UK and US, let's say, resilience is normally dealing with emergency. So a lot of my colleagues, I think about Katie Holdham in Manchester or Alice Reeves in London, are now not the front. Are now dealing with this emergency on the coronavirus, because they're also in charge of organizing all the emergency management response when a crisis comes to a city. So there is a difference between the other country and Italy, because there is resilience is not part of the legislation, but we are now creating a new framework for this. And I think our experience here in Milan is leading to new opportunity. Which kind of opportunity it comes? It's pretty interesting to understand and to look at what is Genova is doing. Genova, after the Morandi Bridge collapse, so as a shock for the city, has introduced a new resilience unit, and there is now not a chief resilience officer, but there is a person in charge of resilience. So the same is happening in Turin, and so even the chief resilience officer is becoming a new kind of job opportunity. How could we decline in a different way? Recently, I think it was 10 days ago, the Cariplo Foundation, it's a local foundation, especially working in Lombardy and the Piedmont, has launched a new funding scheme to support organizations and cities in dealing with climate change. And they have allocated part of this budget to create a new person, a new figure, a new public work. Let's say that it's the climate officer. Let's say that it's basically it's based on our experience here in Milan. So we are seeing how this investment made by the Rockefeller Foundation has led not only on investment on how to cope with climate change on the ground, but also how we can create new job opportunity, and we need to define where this new job or this new expertise should be allocated within a municipality. So I think that our experience, so when it's a challenge one, because as you maybe can understand, when you are the only one, you are the first one, you can make a lot of mistake because you don't know exactly how to move, but it makes more clear for who comes next, how could be dealing. So this is where I'm standing at the moment as my role in the city, but let me show you what we are doing at the moment. No, sorry, I just try to enlarge. Okay, I need to use this one. Where we are standing now on the resilience strategy. As I mentioned, sorry, I cannot enlarge more, otherwise go with the webcam. I hope you can see. This is where we start on the resilience. So we start on the resilience department we're creating in December 2017. And there is a three main steps, let's say, that it's important when we think about the resilience, what we have done. First of all is to understand which is the shock and the stress that is impacting the city. So we have delivered a preliminary resilience assessment in November 2018. The preliminary resilience assessment then moved to create a framework, an initial assessment, an initial framework to better understand what the city has to focus on when the city had to and need to define their strategy. The strategy is ready. It's supposed to be published now, but be approved by the city council. But due to the coronavirus, there will be some delay on things. So the city has identified over the years our job. We have was identifying shock and stress, as I mentioned. What is interesting here that we have seen one interesting thing for climate change. When we ask to the community, the resilience assessment is made with a participatory process through interview, with questionnaire, with face-to-face meeting, with a data collection and data analysis, where we have seen that for the city, flooding was still a shock. But what comes interesting in terms of climate change, that the community has identified heat waves, not anymore as a shock, but as a stress. It doesn't mean, which is the difference between shock and stress. Shock is something that is suddenly happen. So it's something that it's come from nowhere. Stress is something that it's the community is getting used of it. Heat waves is not anymore a shock, but it's becoming a stress. So there's an interesting point for this. On the other end, as you can see from these two perspectives, the community never thought about pandemia as the corona as one of the potential shock or stress for the city. This is an interesting way how we perceive the risk as a community, as a city. So that was a sort of a lack of perception in terms of this. Once we have seen the within the preliminary resilience assessment, we also, that could be interesting for you and for all of us, we also have done something different. We also work with the Regional Environmental Protection Agency of Lombardy region and the Emilia-Romagna region, and we have designed a local climate profile. So we have used climate environmental data owned by our Environmental Protection Agency, and we have studied the impact of the climate change since 1901 to 2017, and we had modeling from 2017 to 2050. There comes some interesting outcome. First one, since 1901 until 2017, the temperature in Milan rise of 2 degrees, and we are expecting plus 2 degrees, almost 2 degrees, from 2018 to 2050. So in 1 year, 150, the temperature in Milan rise of 4 degrees. That it's a quite significant impact for our community in terms of health, and it's significant also in terms of how we should redesign the urban design. So we move through the strategy, and from the preliminary resilience assessment, we have identified 6 discovery areas where we want to focus and to work. These discovery areas are also based on the other priority of the cities. So we look at, keep one, it's a couple of that is interesting for us. Circular Milan is looking how we can improve the circular economy, but more on this, on the urban metabolism. So how we can integrate or couple the different infrastructures, water and energy, to become more sustainable and to be more efficient. One of the other could be interesting for us is Cool Milan. It's named Cool not because we are fashion, but because cool is to cooling down the city. And within Cool Milan, we can see later on some action we are already starting. And then our work is also to work on 3 different aspects in the strategy, service and procedure. So as we were saying before, we need also to define the procedure and the legislative framework, infrastructures and space. So we need to understand how we can rethinking the way how we approach the urban design and become more adaptive and more livable in terms of in the time of climate change. And the third one is to work with inhabitants and the community. So how we can become more inclusive and have a more proactive community. Let me highlight on this, and let me thank all the community of Milan and Lombardy region, international community that were supporting the city during this hard time. But we have seen that a lot of the resilient capabilities that we have identified that comes out strongly during the last few weeks of emergency. And one, for example, is all the sharing economy platform and the collaborative economy that in Milan was strong, and they become even more strong at this stage. So working with inhabitants and community and identify them as resilient capabilities also help us a lot during these hard days. So let me go through some of the action that all these materials will be available for you. So I'm just scroll down more faster than expected. But the first one was the resilience department was established. The second one, I think it's more important, will be interesting. When you speak about a city, there is one plan that it's over the other, and is the is normally in English they call it the master plan of the cities. It's a bit different from UK or US or France to our master plan, that is the so-called Piano di Governo del Territorio. At that time when we start the process was to review it was end of 2017, beginning of 2018. One of the 3 pillars of the new master plan is to become a more sustainable, resilient and green cities. So last February, after a long period of consultation and reviewing, we have published a new master plan, and we think we did something unique on the global scale. So we tried to codify resilience in a set of rules. What it comes from from this. So here now in Milan, for all the new construction, but also for ordinary and extraordinary maintenance, we have introduced a new index. It's the climate impact risk index. So it's how the new built environment or the new house should not only look how the impact on the existing environment, but also how the future climate will impact on the built environment, how this new development could contribute to reduce the scale. So since now on the new construction, it's mandatory to have a green roof, a vertical facade. If you cannot make it because you are in, let's say, in the city center of Milan, and there is some limitation imposed by the cultural heritage institution, what we now have to also create that it's you can also compensate the green that you cannot make it, so to improve the green roof or the vertical garden, and you can compensate with a budget. That budget that you can with a fee, sorry, it's not budget, with a fee. That fee will be used by the city to fund two main initiatives. One is the urban forest program, and the other one is what we call the Green Street program. So we also started with the 10 million euro of the local authorities budget, the new way of renaturalization of the cities with the pavements. So removing concrete and put green. Why? Because as you can see from the picture, 74% of the surface in Milan is covered by concrete and asphalt in the street. And the new goals before 2030 is to reduce the soil consumption from 74 to 70%. So we have created all mechanisms that could help us to reduce the soil consumption, to improve the capacity of the city to reduce the heating, and at the same time to be capable to better manage all the extreme weather events as a rainfall or flash flood. This work has been done together with different colleagues from the urban planning department, to the mobility department, to the environmental department before. And so this is, I think, it's an interesting perspective, because at the moment there is no legislation that it's looking specifically on this, and this new index that we have created, the RIC, is becoming an interesting perspective also for the other cities of the network in terms of resilience. So on the other end as well, when we have started collaborating with the local authority, when you work about resilience, you have to be as much as possible inclusive with the other institution. So we have started work with Asso Lombarda, that is the private sector association, the private company association, and we are now looking how the climate change is impacting on the private sector in terms of risk from the different point of view. We are working together with the Polytechnic of Milan on this program. But so it's not only that for us it's interesting how we should adapt as a city, but we also try to understand how the business and the private sector should adapt, and how we can work together to guarantee the business continuity in a time of a flooding. You can see here in the picture, it's something that happened more often years ago, but it's still often now in terms of interruption of one of the public infrastructures. If you are aware of Milan, this is one of the road is going normally to Linate Airport, so it's one of the main assets. And let me use this picture that I think is interesting. In the meantime, as a city, we have started a new program. It's named Piazza Aperte, Open Square. Basically, we are identifying some gray spots in the city that normally were used for parking, were even not used by the population. Was gray area within the city that was somehow like place that was abandoned. We start redesigning this place. As you can see, there is white and yellow things painted on the ground. Why are white and yellow? Because that is a measure that could contribute to reduce the temperature of the ground. But at the same time, as you can see, we have created new recreational space. So we have mixed the environmental needs and the recreational needs in the city, and all this tactical urbanism approach is now dealing to have 65 space around the city that are temporary redesign, as you can see from the picture. And after 6 months, when the people get used of this new way of living, we complete the redesign of the public space. Even now, if you can see, there is a different kind of profile that is needed as work profile, job profile on this section. We have already spoken about risk management. We have spoken about climate scientists. We have spoken about urbanists, about architecture, about engineering. And what is for us, what is important in this is to move together in the same direction in terms of climate change action and to climate change action. So all this complexity, it's essential because to be managed through appropriate department in the city, because it seems to be an easy task, but it's not. Especially when you have a country when there is a lot of public servants that are in the office since years. Now, one more other activities we are working at the moment is the climate action plan to commit with the whole, well, to be on time with the commitment, the international commitment the city has adopted from the Global Compact of Mayors to the C40 initiative. We have decided to integrate in one plan the climate action plan and the air quality plan. So we will have only one plan at the end of this year when we have climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, and the air quality plan in one single plan. This is one of the main goals that the mayor, even at this stage of emergency, is asking us to continue and to push more, because as the mayor has a couple of times already quoted during some interview during the last weeks, environmental transition, social justice, and equity has to be the three pillars of the recovery plan of the city. And going more even in depth with this, last Saturday also highlight how we should have more adaptive infrastructures to different contexts of emergency. So we already start thinking how we can redesign our street and the road in the next few weeks to be as much as possible supportive for the cities at this time. As I mentioned before, we are also running the urban forest plan. Here comes through new expertise with the Polytechnic of Milan and the different two parks of the city, the northern park and the southern park. We are now designing this new plan to improve the greening. I can give you some numbers. During the last 6 months, so basically from November to March until now, the city of Milan, so the municipality, has planted 22,000 new trees, and the metropolitan in the metropolitan area, so with the metropolitan government, we reached all together, we have planted more than 185,000 trees in the metropolitan of Milan. So we are aligned to reach the goal of 3 million trees before 2030. This is not a matter of only a tree, it's a matter of which kind of species of tree we need. Is a matter where we should plant the trees and how is the mechanism also as well that we can engage our utilities of the private sector and be part of this big challenge. So all the others, I was saying on the air and climate plan, it's well designed within it's fully inclusive of different departments. And the climate air and action plan, it's an important reference. That is also what is the Sustainable Development Goals. So one of the monitoring framework we have adopted for the climate and their plan is the Sustainable Development Goals Index that was created and launched by the United Nations. So this is also help us to link how our local action could also contribute to the global action. And I think this is something that already, again, something really, really extremely interesting for us. So that is my presentation. I want to showcase what I would like to suggest is that when I started doing this work was 12 years ago. The request to have a climate change adaptation, climate mitigation expert, and all the resilient expert was not so high like now. This comes because, and this is, I think, is the big challenge for the next few weeks again, is that we need to show pretty clear that all this action is not about environment, is also about environment, but the main things that we need to showcase that decarbonization and fight climate change is the new economy that we need to be after this emergency, because this is what we need. If you think about what we are suffering at the moment, that we cannot get out because there is not enough space in the city to work all together, while there is a solution, less car in the city, and rethinking the urban design with more green. So at the same time, there is coincidence at the moment. There is no scientific base that could demonstrate, but there is something that links air pollution to the spread of the virus. We don't know if there is something related to the PM10 or PM2.5, but what is pretty clear that if the community is already exposed to kind of let's say issue in terms of health for the health problem with the virus, they could be even much stronger. So we need to reduce the exposure of our community to respiratory or other kind of disease related to air pollution, because if we are capable to reduce the air pollution, we also reduce the risk that a new virus could be at the same has the same impact as the coronavirus. So I think that your job, guys, and all of you that we are going to do in this master, it become more and more important in the next few weeks and the next few months, because it's the one of the best solutions that we can recover our country and the European economy and international economy in a faster way. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Piero. That was really, really interesting. It's actually quite reassuring to see that there are cities which are actually moving quite far ahead, and perhaps even I guess at a faster speed compared to what we're doing at the national or, well, for sure, global level. There are actually several questions from the people online. Maybe I would just like to take this opportunity to ask you a very quick question, since you also brought up the connection with the virus and with the current emergency. Do you think that the framework and the strategy, the action that you have been building to build resilience, mostly to climate change, has that been helpful also to kind of be more prepared to cope with the current crisis? So do you see some benefits from, let's say, the strategy which was in the first place put together to deal with climate change? Do you see some benefits also for the present emergency and the present situation?
Yes, I believe that a lot of things, as I was trying to highlight, when we have created this resilience assessment, we have looked at the shock and stress, but we also identify resilience capability within the community. And the collaborative approach, the collaborative economy, we have identified as an opportunity to move faster in terms of climate change, how we can also work together, I don't know, to managing green areas, or because that is also an opportunity, or other kind of capabilities, and also in terms of how we can, let's say, reconvert part of our activities from, let's say, the carbon fuel, fossil fuel economy to a more sustainable economy, and also showcase how it could be useful for the emergency. I'll give you an example. We were working a lot with the Fab Lab, because for us the Fab Lab, so is the digital manufacturing, was an opportunity to produce more locally some product instead to receive the product from, I don't know, China or other parts. So to have a local production to reduce the emission and to do the capacity. A couple of weeks ago, it was a Saturday morning, I was happy to see some of these persons. We worked together, went to the Bergamo hospital where there was missing a piece, one of the ventilator that is necessary. They take their print, and they were using the same approach we use in terms of climate, how we can improve the circularity and digital manufacturing to support the production of medical equipment. So there is a lot of common ground between the climate and the coronavirus. As a colleague of mine from UK was joking last night and said, how is your life? You always live in a crisis because you are dealing with the resilience, and the resilience is based on crisis. So we moved from a climate crisis to a corona crisis, but as we said, in a time of crisis comes a lot of opportunities. So it is where we have to find the common ground between the coronavirus crisis and the climate crisis in rethinking our community in the near future.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me take some of the questions. So someone was asking, you mentioned a little bit the difference between shock and stress. And I think people are interested to better understand where does that distinction come from. Is a definition that you came to like through survey by asking people what they think about the two notions, or is there like a book or a scientific reference which define the two terms in a different way, shock and stress?
Well, sorry, I didn't frame well before. The preliminary resilience assessment is based on a methodology developed by the 100 Resilient Cities Network together with the ARUP. ARUP is a consultancy group. The shock and stress definition and the wheel that we are using is based on a scientific methodology. I can share with you. It's open methodology, so I can share with you, all of you, which is the reference, the proper reference. So you have the name. What is the difference? Shock is something that it's come from nowhere. It's like a flash flooding when it's sunny and in 2 hours you are in the middle of hurricanes. So it's something that comes from nowhere.
It is not dissipation.
Exactly. It cannot even. It's like this virus somehow. Let's say, let me say, this virus could be predictable but not thinkable, in my opinion. It is the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario, normally you don't absorb in your policy. The worst case scenario, and so the shock, it's the flash flooding. The stress, it's something that it's more common. I mean, the waste collection and the risk to have stop in the waste management system is a stress for a lot of cities. It's not something that comes from nowhere. It's something that you already have a problem. So the stress is something that you face on everyday life, and it's critical to manage. Shock is something that is not predictable and it comes from nowhere. Like the collapse of infrastructures. I mean, all of us were aware that our bridge around the country were suffering of old age, let's say, but nobody was expecting that the Morandi bridge will collapse like it was. So the shock is the collapse of Morandi bridge of the coronavirus, and the stress is the waste management or heat waves, because we are now get used or living in a more hotter weather. I don't know how much is it's good that the people get used of living in a heat waves, but is what they perceive.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, more pragmatic questions. Someone was asking, so you have all this activity, action aimed at building resilience to climate change, and someone was asking how, for example, students attending this master, suppose they want to join these activities and these jobs, like in the public sector, they were asking, do you need to go through a public competition to become a city officer, or are there vacancies opening which are being posted, for example, on the website of the municipality of Milan? How does it work?
That's a good question, actually. Well, mine was like a public course, or was a public selection. So there was more than 80 candidates at that time, and comes through through the selection process. I was the one, the lucky one, and to work with us, with the department, we always go through a public course. So you can look on the website. I can share with you as well the link of where you can look if the City of Milan is posting a new position on this. And well, we're supposed to have a new position. We are not sure at the moment. We need to understand with the new budget needs in the future. One of the things I'm suggesting, there is two different levels. The private sector, there is an increased demand of resilience expert within the international organization, a lot, but also a lot within the private company and private consultancy. So new consultancy, well, the big four are also looking for new experts on resilience. About public, there is more demand in UK, in France, in Germany, less in Italy, but we are pushing with to have more demand for chief resilience officer also from the public authorities, and the Fondazione Cariplo is giving a new support on this. So my suggestion to you is in the next few months, look at the municipality in Lombardy region, where we're gonna need to hire new expert on chief on resilience on climate change. So yeah.
Thank you. I think some people were also interested to learn a little bit more about your CV. I mean, what did you study? And if you can tell, like in a few minutes, give us a little bit of an overview of your education, but also expertise before taking this job.
Well, I guess I'm not an architect. I'm not an urbanist. I'm not an engineer. My background is as an economist. I was doing my bachelor in international relations and diplomacy at the University of Bologna. Then I do a master in economy of the European Union at the University of Bologna. Then I can also share a funny story. At the end of my master, I wrote an email to Professor Carraro asking a recommendation to where I should continue my study or my work. He was so kind to answer me back, and so there was an interesting connection between what we are now doing with Professor Carraro today. And after my university, I was doing my Erasmus placement at the end of my university at the Stockholm Environment Institute. And that's where comes my inspiration for resilience, because at that time the director of the Stockholm Environment Institute was the Johan Rockström, what they normally define the Maradona of resilience. So it was the one that take resilience to the next level to World Economic Forum and all the international organization. After this time of the Stockholm Environment Institute, I moved back to Italy. I worked for a while for a member of the European Parliament, Umberto Guidoni, was the first Italian astronaut in space, but he was at that time part of the European Parliament as the shadow speaker of the 2020 package. So I worked with him on the climate change and the scientific approach. After it, I was decided to have a professional master funded by the big energy company and in utilities management. So I learned how to work with engineering and lawyer, how we should more the management of the water utilities, the energy utilities, and all the different utilities, because then it comes where you learn to develop more to how to deal with the city. Then for a while I worked at the Kyoto Club, that is a no-profit organization, the head of the international cooperation unit. After a while, I decided to try to have my own experience. So we launched a startup with a couple of colleagues. One is Sara Venturini, that also was part of the CMCC for a while. His name is Climalia, and the startup was the first Italian company tried to deliver resilience consultancy for private and public sector. And in the meantime, I also had research activities at UAV in Venice, so at the University of Architecture in Venice. So I was doing research with Professor Francesco Musco and the Planning Climate Change unit. So step by step, I learned how a city is working and how I become what they in English call this a city makers, or they love to call us the city makers. So he's a kind of a new expert dealing with resilience and the climate change adaptation, that is understand how we should rethinking the way of living of the city. So basically, my suggestion to all of you is always to look out of the fence line, try to understand which is a new expertise you never thought about. When I do my professional master, I would say, oh gosh, it would be a nightmare. 6 months with engineering. So I was from a perspective, was the worst experience in my life, but at the end of the day, it was my best experience in the life, because you understand what you don't want to do it, and you understand in more detail the complexity of a country, of a city, of their own infrastructures. And these are my main, let's say, background on this. So yeah, that's where I am. Can I say sometimes, just to end, when it comes to climate change, it's just something really basic. It's like it's thanks to Al Gore. I watched the movie Unconventional Truth. I was at university. Was 2006, 2007. I was bored one night and I say, let me see this documentary of Al Gore. And I realized that we can speak about worker rights, we can speak about everything, but if we don't have a planet, and that climate change is poses the risk our survival on the planet, all the other conversation about worker rights, economy doesn't make sense. So it's thanks to Al Gore I start working on climate change. Sometimes just a movie makes the difference in your life.
Thank you, Piero. Yeah, so I know you're quite busy, so maybe I will just ask you one final question and then we will let you go. There are actually more questions that are coming, but what we can do is try to post on the website of the master some answer to some of the questions which are coming through. Some of them are also quite technical, so maybe it's not the right place here to discuss them, but we can come back to them later, either through email or through the website of
Enrica.
Yes.
One suggestion: if you want to collect all the questions, and you can send me, I will answer back, and then you can share it. I'm happy to do this.
Great, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Just one final curiosity is: are there other cities in Italy which are trying to, let's say, copy your model, your way of dealing with this big challenge, or not? Well,
there is a protocol signed by Genoa, Milan, and Turin. That this collaboration on these three cities comes after the Morandi Bridge, because we have realized how we are interconnected, and we want to study the cascade effect of the collapse of the bridge in Genoa, in Milan. Why? With a simple number: 40% of the goods coming to the metropolitan area of Milan comes through the Morandi Bridge. So or we work together with the other cities, or we fail in case of an emergency. So at the moment, there is, as I said, Genova has created a new unit on resilience, on urban resilience. So Genova has a new unit on urban resilience. It's not a department, it's a small one, but it's an initial step. There is a person in charge of resilience within the cabinet of the mayor in Turin. So even the city of Turin. Well, let's say the first one launched this resilience approach was the city of Bologna. It was years ago in 2012 with Giovanni Fini and his department, and they were with the Blue Up, I think were one of the first one. We have seen other reaction from the southern part of the country. So Lecce and Bari have now working through resilience. So there is a lot of new cities that are understanding where to allocate these topics, but even more important, how we can get the funding to move forward on this. And the big challenge, in my opinion, is not the only big city has this kind of approach. Is it more important we have like small municipality or the metropolitan government or the province that they are taking this? And step by step, you're also getting there to have also small municipalities. So yes, there is a movement, and it's getting, we're going better, and I think we can go even much better after this merger.
Thank you very much, Piero.
Very much to all of you.
So we will come back through email with some more questions from the web, and then we will be in touch. Now I'll let you go.
Thank you very much.
The current situation. Bye-bye.